Violence in video games. For years, the two seem to go hand in hand, and while nowadays there's much more emphasis on a broader scope of genres that don't necessarily include any blood or gore, the video game industry has a long and fascinating history with violence that has impacted many contemporary games, from gameplay to content in general. So today we're counting down the top 10 most violent video games. Let's jump in. And at number 10 is Gears of War. The sequel to the critically acclaimed Gears of War, this one was released in 2008 and is a military sci-fi third-person shooter. This game introduced a whole lot more brutal weapons than its predecessor, including the ability to use a chainsaw and engage in chainsaw duels. There's also a flamethrower, a chain gun, a mortar cannon, and the Gorgon pistol, which is an SMG-esque machine pistol, and you can even use a corpse as a human shield. Doesn't get more bloody than that. But apparently it does, because in at number 9 we've got Soldier of Fortune. Not to be confused with the magazine, this video game was released by Activision in 2000, and is a first-person shooter game that involves the theft of nuclear weapons. You're up against a neo-fascist group, and you play a US mercenary who tries to prevent these terrorists from selling nukes to the wrong people. The game was created using the Ghoul engine, and because of that it has a whole lot of extremely graphic violence, with 26 zones on enemies' bodies that can sustain damage. You can even use a microwave weapon in the last mission to cause your enemies to explode, like an overcooked pizza pocket. And at number 8 is the God of War series. With a title like God of War, you bet your ass there's gonna be some violence. It's all about getting revenge, and based on Greek mythology, the violence and debauchery are only fitting of such. The new God of War game shouldn't be short on the gore either, despite having a more intimate playing style that's moved away from the previous installation's gameplays. God of War Ascension has garnered some controversy from a few of the scenes in the game, including one in which a Burrows Before Hoes trophy is awarded, and a scene where Kratos cuts an elephant monster's brain out of its head. Fun stuff. And at number 7 is Thrill Kill. So in case you guys didn't know, the term thrill killing is a premeditated murder that is motivated by sheer excitement. Good old hedonism. So it makes sense where this game gets its name. Thrill Kill is an unreleased 1998 fighting game that was cancelled a few weeks prior to its release, all because EA bought out its publisher. But since it was practically finished, it's still fairly easy to get your hands on a copy of the game online. But it does require a PlayStation emulator. It's the first game to ever get the ESRB rating of adults only, for its crude depictions of violence, which prior to this was only given out to media that was incredibly sexual. To be fair, this one is pretty sexual too. It's got some BDSM fun times all up in the violent mix. Up next at 6 is Postal 2. A first-person shooter black comedy, Postal 2, similar to its predecessor, has a whole lot of violence in it. With the tagline, "Remember, it's only as violent as you are," Postal 2 really lets the player decide how aggressive they'd like to be. Each day you're given tasks to complete, seemingly mundane ones, and it's up to you to be civil or chaotic, which can be difficult when you're constantly being provoked by characters you encounter in the game. The game was even banned in several countries, including New Zealand, Australia, Malaysia, and Germany. But hey, sometimes you just want to piss on stuff. Digitally, that is. Up next at number 5 is Super COLUMBINE Massacre RPG. While the violence in this game doesn't exceed some of the others on this list in quantity, the fact that it's based off of real events gets it higher up on the list. Also, it's kind of f***ed up, and uses real security camera footage from the actual shooting. You play as the gunmen responsible for the Columbine Massacre, Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris, and after their suicides, you get to play them in hell. The game's creator has said that it was supposed to be a critique of traditional media sensationalizing the shooting, and a parody of violence in video games in general, but as you can imagine, the reception of the game was incredibly negative, from its content straight to its title. Up next, number 4 is Hotline Miami. Inspired by the 2011 neo-noir film Drive and David Lynch, Hotline Miami takes place in 1989 Miami and follows the story of Jacket and Biker once you finish the main storyline, two characters who have been receiving phone calls instructing them to slaughter the Russian mafia members in the city. It's a top-down shoot-'em-up game with the goal of massacring as many people as possible. Described as ultra-violent, brutally raw, and a surrealist dive into the mind of a maniac, the game has received rave reviews, and the positive response even led to a sequel. Plus, the soundtrack is super dope. Up next, number 3 is Manhunt. Not the only game on this list from Rockstar Games, but more on that later. So anyway, Manhunt was released in 2003, and it's a stealth-based survival horror game, where you play a death row prisoner forced to be in a series of snuff films. Things get pretty sadistic pretty fast. It was also banned in several countries, and for a hot second it was implicated in a murder case in the UK before being dismissed of it in 2004. And in Ontario, Canada, it was the first computer game to be classified as a film and restricted to adults due to its depictions of violence. Turns out some employees at Rockstar also felt a little iffy and uncomfortable about the game, with former employee Jeff Williams stating that there was almost a mutiny at the company over the game. And at number 2 is the Grand Theft Auto series. Similar to our number 1 spot, a game that's acted as a predecessor for many of the other violent games on this list, Grand Theft Auto has gotten a whole hell of a lot of heat, with lots lots of controversy surrounding the portrayal of violence in the game. GTA 5 especially has received a lot of controversy for the hostage interrogation mission that was meant to be a political commentary, because some felt that the torture in the mission was actually in bad taste. Rockstar has been slammed with a few lawsuits over the years too, and has had to deal with many pointing fingers claiming the game influenced kids to commit crimes. That being said, it is satire at its best, and it is just saying. And finally, in at number 1 is Mortal Kombat, the series as a whole. Mortal Kombat has quite the history as a violent video game. While the initial arcade version of the game featured full-blown blood and gore, console versions, minus Nintendo's because of content guidelines, had a cheat that would unlock all of the gratuitous gut. There's a lot of controversy in the early 90s surrounding the violence in the game, especially including the fatalities, and it was a large component in the 1993 US congressional hearing on video game violence, and the outcry for government regulation of video games as a whole. While it seems as if Mortal Kombat is hardly outrageous these days, Time magazine made a very good point about the game and its history of violence back in 2012. The reason that the 1992 classic remains seminal is because it broke an implicit taboo about what was okay to put in a game. There we have it, friends. What games do you think are the most violent? And which are your favorites? Let us know in those comments below. But for now, I'm Kelly Pally for Top 10 Gaming, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.